So for some people, I'd say leverage is kind of a scary word and something they stay away from. But if you understand leverage, I mean, think about a house. Like you buy a house and you usually buy it with leverage, and no one's too worried about that. Crypto presents an opportunity where you can take healthy leverage, especially in a bull market. And that's what Gordon's going to walk us through here. Take on healthy leverage and kind of get more for what you have. So if you have five or ten or $20,000, you can actually squeeze a lot more juice out of it and turn that crypto into cash flow while never having to sell that crypto. Or maybe you've been holding BTC for quite a while. You don't want to sell your BTC because it's going to trigger a capital gain for you. Well, there's ways that you can take a loan against your BTC. I know we've chatted about it a few times on the channel, but Gordon's going to go into a bit of visual demonstration, and I really hope this brings some value. If it does, let us know in the comments. Gordon, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas. And as you mentioned, this strategy is going to work best moving through a bull market. So that's why we're calling it this bullish bias liquidity looping. And I know you talk about this a lot, but it's also helpful to visualize it sometimes because we do want the ability to put our capital to work. And while we're waiting for price appreciation on assets like Bitcoin, Solana, or Sui, we can execute lend borrows to free up additional capital that we can then put to work in liquidity pools and yield bearing assets. So let's take a look at one of these examples in practice where you might be someone who's holding a decent amount of Bitcoin. Maybe it's in wrap Bitcoin or CBBTC format, and you want to participate in the price appreciation over the next 6 to 12 months. But what we can do here is we can supply this Bitcoin as collateral on a platform like Moonwell, and we can borrow against it pretty safely with a 40% loan to value ratio. So if we're putting up 20K, that means we can borrow about $8,000 against that. And when we borrow that $8,000 of stablecoin, we can then go and put that to work in liquidity pools to generate cash flow. So that's what we're representing here. We would take that $8,000 of borrowed capital, bring it over to somewhere like Aerodrome, put it to work in liquidity pools. And when we're working with fast track clients, Lucas, we're roughly aiming to get about 10% per month yield off of the capital that we're putting to work. So that
Mm-hmm.
$8,000 is going to yield and cash flow us about $800 per month in fees. Okay. We're then able to take that $800 per month in fees and feed it back over into our bull run bag. So we can use that $800 to buy even more Bitcoin and then loop this entire process. So we
Can
buy
I ask a
more
question?
Bitcoin.
In case
Yeah,
someone's
of
wondering
course.
this, is where's the 40% come from? Is that just a general rule of thumb? Why doesn't someone take 80% or less? Like where's that? Why do you use that as a rule of thumb?
Yeah, great question. Because we don't want to overextend our leverage. And if we're borrowing at 40%, we're leaving a little bit of buffer room for the price of Bitcoin to potentially pull back. If Bitcoin pulls back, 10, 15, or 20%, and that's not out of the ordinary as we move through a bull market, we want
Hmm.
to have a bit of buffer because the liquidation threshold on some of these protocols like Moonwell and others can be somewhere around 75, 80%.
Yep.
So if you're borrowing up to 65% loan to value ratio, you're going to have much less room for the price of Bitcoin to pull back before you get liquidated. So a very good question and a very good point for people to remember. We don't want to overextend our leverage. So when we do earn this $800 in fees, we buy more Bitcoin with it, and then we can supply that new Bitcoin as collateral on Moonwell. And that does two things. Firstly, it improves our loan to value ratio. So it drives us down from 40%, let's say, towards 35%.
Hmm.
And by virtue of the fact that that's happening, we're also increasing our borrow capacity. So we could then borrow additional capital to bring us back from 35 to 40%. That gives us even more stablecoin that we can then bring back over into Aerodrome, which increases the $8,000 initial capital and allows us to cash flow even more capital or cash flow every single month. And we can repeat that process, ad nauseum over the next few months, but there probably is an inflection point, Lucas, in the market where it makes sense to stop looping that because we will come to a point, maybe 3, 4, 5 months from now, where we need to switch into profit taking mode as prices move up. They're not going to go up forever. So we need to take profits. We probably want to stop allocating to the bull run bag at a certain point and start thinking about taking profits.
Hmm.
So that's the strategy in essence. And you can do it across different assets like Solana and Sui as well and build up a portfolio of, a very healthy bull run bag, complementing it with some really nice cash flow.
I love it. And I think guys who join us in fast track, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes they already built kind of a crypto portfolio, but they're just sick and tired of having it sit there. And they just kind of realize, hey, instead of just sitting on Bitcoin for 4 years or 10 years, I could put it to work while never actually selling that Bitcoin and actually creating some cash flow from it. So some people start with nothing and they start building DeFi positions, and they use that cash flow to build their bull run bags, and they start getting into this totally legit. Some people, they already have crypto, they don't want to sell it, and they want to free up some capital. So this works really, really well for that, both in Fast Track and UIG. These strategies are shared. So if this was valuable to you, let us know. If you have any follow-up questions or want any other content created around this, let us know in the comments. Maybe you want a list of like the top 5, 6, 7 lending platforms that we trust. Maybe you have a question on how we actually assess these lending platforms. Like, I mean, it's a whole different video, but how do I know to trust Moonwell? And someone actually asked me in the video if Aave takes custody of my assets. And like the answer is no, it's all DeFi blockchain. But those are all legit questions. So if you want any content created around that, let us know in the comments. With that said, Gordon, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lucas.